By examining scribal traditions, we can prove beyond question that the Old Testament is reliable as a document of antiquity. In this video, we'll present the evidence for the Old Testament's divine inspiration, as is found in its many fulfilled prophecies. If it is true that the Old Testament accurately and repeatedly predicts the future, it can safely be concluded that something more than man is behind the words of the text. In truth, there are so many fulfilled prophecies in the Old Testament that it is hard to know where to begin. In this video, we'll narrow our focus to just a few of the hundreds of Old Testament prophecies. In Jeremiah chapter 25, written 50 years before the event would take place, it is declared that Babylon would rule over Judah for 70 years, and that after the 70 years were complete, Babylon would also be judged. In 609 BC, Babylon captured the last Assyrian king and took over the holdings of the Assyrian Empire, which included the land of Israel. Babylon then began to flex its muscles by taking many Jews as captives to Babylon and by destroying Jerusalem and its temple. This domination of the Jews ended in 539 BC, when Cyrus, a leader of the Persians and Medes, conquered Babylon, bringing an end to the empire. In Isaiah 45, written about 700 BC, we find a prophecy that was fulfilled many years later in 539 BC. The prophet declared that God would open the gates of Babylon for Cyrus and his army. Despite Babylon's extraordinary defenses, which included moats and walls that were more than 70 feet thick and 300 feet high with 250 watchtowers, Cyrus was able to enter the city and conquer it. Historical findings reveal that Cyrus and his troops accomplished this by diverting the flow of the Euphrates River into a large lake basin. Cyrus was then able to march his army across the riverbed and into the city. In Isaiah 13, there is another prophecy that was not fulfilled until 539 BC. Here Isaiah tells us that Babylon would be permanently overthrown. Babylon had been defeated by the Assyrian Empire, but was able to recover and later conquer the Assyrian Empire. But history confirms that following Cyrus's destruction of Babylon in 539 BC, it never again rose to power as an empire. In Isaiah 14, the prophet predicts yet again what would not come true until 539 BC. Not only did the prophet successfully claim that Babylon would be brought to a humble and final end, he also claims that Babylon would be reduced to swampland. Well, history tells us that the buildings of Babylon fell into a gradual state of ruin during the next several centuries. Interestingly, when archaeologists excavated Babylon during the 1800s, they discovered that some parts of the city could not be dug up because they were under a water table that had risen over the years. In Jeremiah 32, another bold prophecy is made. In this passage, Jeremiah claimed that the Jews would survive their captivity in Babylon and return home. But parts of this prophecy were ultimately fulfilled. Many Jews had been taken as captives to Babylon beginning around 605 BC. But in 538 BC, they were released from captivity, and many eventually returned to their homeland. In the book of Nahum, chapter 1, the prophecy is made regarding the condition of the Ninevites at the time of their demise. In this passage, and once again in Nahum chapter 3, the prophet said that during the final hours of the attack on Nineveh, the Ninevites would be drunk. There is sufficient evidence that this prophecy was actually fulfilled. According to an ancient historian, the Assyrian king gave wine to his soldiers. Assyrian deserters told this to the enemy, who then attacked that night. This historian compiled his historical works about 600 years after the fall of Nineveh, and in doing so confirmed the biblical account. Once again in Nahum chapter 3, the prophet makes another bold prediction that would come true. Nahum declared that Nineveh would be damaged by fire. Archaeologists unearthed the site during the 1800s and found a layer of ash covering the ruins. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, Nineveh suffered a defeat from which it never recovered. Extensive traces of ash representing the sack of the city of the Babylonians, Scythians, and Medes in 612 BC have been found in many parts of the Acropolis. After 612 BC, the city ceased to be important. In Ezekiel 26, this prophet predicts the attacks on Tyre that would take place in 573 BC, 332 BC, and 1291 AD. The prophet stated that Tyre, the Phoenician Empire's most powerful city, would be attacked by many nations because of its treatment of Israel. At about the time that Ezekiel delivered this prophecy, Babylon had begun a 13-year attack on Tyre's mainland. Later, in about 332 BC, Alexander the Great conquered the land of Tyre and brought an end to the Phoenician Empire. Then after that, Tyre later fell again under the rule of the Romans, the Crusaders, and the Muslims, who destroyed the city yet again in 1291 AD. In Ezekiel 26, the prophet states that the stone, timber, and soil of Tyre would be thrown into the seas. This is a fitting description of how Alexander the Great built a land bridge from the mainland to the island of Tyre when he attacked it in 333 and 332 BC. It is believed that he took the rubble from Tyre's mainland ruins and tossed it, stones, timber, and soil, into the sea to build the land bridge, which today is still in existence. The exact fulfillment of just the few prophecies that we've talked about is more than enough to demonstrate the divine inspiration of the Old Testament. And it truly is evidence that God was at work in the hearts of the prophets of our Old Testament.